The moment my daughter-in-law said, "My whole family, 25 people, are spending Christmas here," I felt something snap inside me. For years, I'd cooked every meal, cleaned every corner, and smiled through the insults just to keep peace in my own home. But that day, something changed. She stood in my kitchen, proud and entitled, waiting for me to agree. I looked at her and said, "Perfect." Her smile grew until I finished the sentence. "Perfect, because I'm going on vacation. You can cook and clean this year. I'm not your servant." The color drained from her face. For the first time in 5 years, she didn't know what to say. That was the moment I decided to stop being invisible, and she had no idea what was coming next. Stay with me, because what happened after that Christmas announcement changed everything. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you've ever been taken for granted. My name is Eleanor Hartman. I'm 67 years old, and I've lived in this house for almost 40 years. For most of that time, it was a warm place. My husband Henry built this home for us. He was the kind of man who made me feel safe just by sitting next to him. We raised our son Ethan here. I thought this house would always be full of family and laughter. But life doesn't always go the way you plan. Henry passed away 10 years ago. I thought the house would feel empty, and it did, but at least it was peaceful. I still woke up every morning, made coffee, listened to the birds, and thought of him. Then Ethan got married to Sabrina, and everything changed. At first, I was happy. She was young, polite, well-dressed. She called me Mom the first few months, and I tried to make her feel welcome. I wanted to believe we could be a real family. I helped them move in, showed her how to use the old oven, even shared some of Henry's favorite recipes. I thought it was love. I thought it was kindness. But little by little, things started to shift. It wasn't sudden. It happened in quiet ways that were easy to miss. One day, she changed the curtains, then the rugs, then the dishes. "I just want to make the house feel fresher," she said. I told her I liked the old ones, but she laughed. "Oh, Eleanor, you're so traditional." Then one morning, I noticed that my wedding photo was gone from the living room wall. She said she moved it for the new color theme. That's what she called it. The new color theme. I wanted to be kind. I didn't want to cause problems between her and Ethan. I thought, it's just decoration, it doesn't matter. But it wasn't about decorations, it was about control. Every small change was her way of saying, "This is my house now." Ethan works long hours. He doesn't see what I see. When he comes home, he's tired. She smiles, serves him dinner, and everything looks perfect. I tried to talk to him once. I said, "Ethan, I don't feel comfortable anymore. I feel like I'm in the way." He said, "Mom, don't be dramatic. Sabrina's just trying to help." "Help," he said. That word stayed in my mind. Help? No one helps by pushing someone out of their own life. These days, Sabrina calls my name more than anyone else. Not kindly, not softly. "Eleanor, can you clean the patio?" "Eleanor, did you iron my dress?" "Eleanor, the coffee's cold." She never says please. She never says thank you. Sometimes I wonder if she even remembers that I'm Ethan's mother, not her maid. Every morning I hear her voice before I even sit down for breakfast. Sometimes I answer. Sometimes I pretend not to hear. Pretending gives me a few minutes of peace, and that's all I have left most days. It's strange, living in a place you own, but feeling like a guest. I still pay most of the bills. I keep the pantry full. I clean. I fix things when they break, but somehow it feels like I owe her something, like I'm here on borrowed time. Once one of her friends came over. I was wiping the counter when they walked in. The friend smiled and said, "Oh, you must be the housekeeper." Sabrina didn't correct her. She just smiled. I laughed it off, but that night I cried quietly in my room. I keep telling myself, "It's fine, Eleanor. Don't make trouble. They're young. Things will get better." But 5 years have gone by, and it hasn't gotten better. It's only gotten worse. Now she makes decisions without asking. She hosts parties and invites people I don't even know. I'm the one who cleans up afterward. Ethan helps her, but not much. When I tell him I'm tired, he says, "Mom, you love cooking, don't you?" As if that makes it okay. Sometimes I stand at the back door and look out at the old oak tree Henry and I planted. That tree is still growing, even after all these years. I tell myself, if the tree can stay strong through every storm, so can I. But some days it's hard. I've thought about moving out. I even looked at small apartments once. But the idea of leaving this house, the one Henry built, the one where I raised my son, feels like losing him all over again. So I stay, and I stay quiet. People think silence means peace, but it doesn't. Silence is just a way to survive when no one wants to hear your voice. Every night I sit on the edge of my bed and talk to Henry in my mind. I tell him about the day, about how I cooked dinner for Ethan and Sabrina again, about how she corrected me again, about how I smiled even though I wanted to scream. Sometimes I think if he were still alive, none of this would be happening. He wouldn't have let anyone treat me like this. But he's gone, and I'm here. So I do what women like me always do. I endure. The other day, while I was cleaning, Sabrina came into the kitchen wearing a red dress and those high heels she loves. She said, "Eleanor, I have great news. My family is coming to spend Christmas here. 25 people." I froze. 25? She kept talking, smiling like she'd just given me a gift. "It'll be fun. You always make everything so nice." I nodded, but inside something shifted. It was like a door opened in my chest. For years, I've kept my anger locked away behind that door, but that day, I felt it move. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling and thought about every year I'd spent serving her, every insult I swallowed, every time Ethan looked away. I realized something. Peace doesn't come from silence. Peace comes from respect, and I haven't had that in years. So, I made myself a promise. This Christmas will be different. They don't know it yet, but the woman they think is weak, the one they call Eleanor like she's the help. She's not gone. She's still here. And this time, she's done staying quiet. That morning started like any other. I was in the kitchen making coffee and setting the table for breakfast. The house was quiet except for the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. Then I heard her heels, sharp, confident, echoing through the hallway like a countdown. Sabrina walked in, wearing a bright red dress at 8 in the morning, her lipstick as bold as her voice. She always dressed like she was going to a photo shoot, even when she had nowhere to go. "Good morning, Eleanor," she said, too cheerful, too fake. She didn't wait for me to answer. She never did. She pulled out a chair, sat down, and crossed her legs like she was the lady of the house. "I have amazing news," she said, smiling like it was a gift. "My family, all 24 of them, are coming here for Christmas dinner." I froze, holding the coffee pot midair. She kept talking. "You make the best food, everyone says so. Ethan told them his mom is a wonderful cook. So, of course, we're hosting this year." The room went quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. The clock ticked louder. The smell of coffee turned bitter. I slowly looked up at her. Her smile was wide, proud, waiting for my usual answer. "Of course, Sabrina." But that morning, something inside me shifted. I set the coffee pot down gently and said very calmly, "Perfect, Sabrina, a perfect Christmas." Her smile grew. She thought I was agreeing. Until I finished my sentence. "Perfect, because I won't be here." The words hung in the air like smoke. She blinked. Once. Twice. Her smile twitched. What do you mean?" I said, looking her straight in the eyes, "I'm going on vacation. You can cook, clean, and host your perfect Christmas all by yourself." Her face went pale, her hand shook, the spoon clinking against her cup. For the first time in years, she didn't have a comeback. "This isn't funny," she said, forcing a laugh. "You're joking, right?" "I'm not joking," I said quietly. "I'm tired." That was when Ethan walked in, still in his work clothes, his tie loose, his face tired. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between us. Sabrina turned to him like a child running to her father. "Ethan, your mom's being ridiculous. She says she's not helping with Christmas. Can you believe that?" Ethan gave me a nervous smile. "Mom, don't make a big deal out of it. It's just Christmas. Sabrina invited her family. It'll be nice. Don't stress." "Don't stress?" I said. "Ethan, your wife just told me 24 people are coming here without asking me, and expects me to cook and clean for all of them." Sabrina's tone sharpened. "You're overreacting. We're family, Eleanor. Family helps each other." I nodded slowly. "You're right. Family helps each other, but help is asked for, not demanded." She crossed her arms. "You're being selfish." Selfish? I repeated, almost laughing. After 5 years of serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner for every guest you've brought into this house? After cleaning up every party while you slept until noon? Ethan sighed, rubbing his forehead. Mom, please don't start. This isn't starting, Ethan, I interrupted. This is ending. He looked confused. Ending what? Me being treated like the maid in my own home. The silence after that was heavy. You could almost hear the clock ticking between us. Sabrina tried to smile again, her voice turning sweet like honey that hides the poison. Eleanor, you're overthinking. You love hosting. You always say you enjoy cooking. I enjoyed it, I said, when it was for people who respected me. Her eyes flickered. Just for a second, I saw fear behind them. This is ridiculous, she snapped. My family already made plans. My uncle's flying in from Florida. My cousins took time off work. You can't just abandon us. I can, I said, and I will. You can't, she shouted. Ethan, say something. Ethan looked at me, his voice calm but disappointed. Mom, come on. Don't make this dramatic. It's just a family dinner. Dramatic? I repeated quietly. Ethan, this isn't dinner. This is a schedule of servitude. He frowned. You're taking this too personally. I should have taken it personally years ago, I said. Sabrina stood up suddenly. You know what? Fine. Go. But don't expect us to cancel Christmas because you're having a bad day. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel hurt. I felt calm. Completely calm. You should start learning how to handle things without me, I said, because from now on, you'll have to. Her lips trembled, but she didn't speak. Ethan tried again, softer now. Mom, please, let's not fight. Let's just have one peaceful Christmas. I looked at both of them. Peaceful, I said. That's all I ever wanted. But peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from respect. And for 5 years, I've had none. Sabrina's face went blank. I could see the confusion turning into anger. For once, she wasn't in control. That's when I knew. Something had shifted in the room. The balance of power wasn't hers anymore. No one spoke. The only sound was the ticking clock and the faint clink of a spoon rolling onto the floor. I picked up my cup, took a sip, and said quietly, Perfect Christmas, Sabrina. Truly perfect. But you'll have to celebrate it without me. Then I stood, rinsed my cup, and walked out of the kitchen. Behind me, I heard nothing. Not even her heels. Just silence. The kind of silence that comes when someone finally realizes they've lost control. That was the morning everything began to change. When I told them I was leaving for Christmas, you could have heard a pin drop. For a second, no one moved, no one breathed. Then Ethan laughed. That awkward laugh people make when they think you're joking but hope you're not serious. Mom, he said, rubbing his neck. Come on, don't be like this. Don't make it a big deal. It is a big deal, I said. Your wife just invited 24 people to my house without even asking me. He sighed. You're being too sensitive. Those words, too sensitive, hit me harder than anything else. For a moment, I didn't even answer. I just stared at him, my son, the boy who once defended me from everyone, now defending her from me. Sabrina let out a shaky breath, pretending to wipe a tear that wasn't there. I don't understand, she said softly, her voice cracking just enough to sound convincing. I just wanted to have a nice Christmas. Why are you being so cruel, Eleanor? Why are you against me all the time? I almost laughed. You don't want a nice Christmas, Sabrina. You want a perfect one, the one you can show off on Instagram. You don't need me to be happy. You need me to cook, clean, and make it look effortless. Her eyes narrowed. The fake tears disappeared faster than they came. You're twisting everything, she said sharply. I'm trying to make this family come together. This family? I asked. Or your family? That shut her up for a moment. Ethan tried again, lowering his voice like he was talking to a child. Mom, please. It's just a few days. After Christmas, everything goes back to normal. I looked at him and felt something break inside me. Normal. What he called normal was me waking up before dawn to cook for his wife's guests. Normal was me cleaning up while they laughed in the living room. Normal was me being invisible in the house I built. No, Ethan, I said quietly. Nothing is going back to normal because I'm done pretending that this is okay. He blinked like he didn't understand the language I was speaking. Sabrina reached for his hand, whispering, "She's just emotional, Ethan. She doesn't mean it." I turned to her. "You don't get to decide what I mean." She gasped, putting a hand to her chest. "You're being hostile, Eleanor. I've done nothing but show you respect." "Respect?" I almost smiled. "You treat me like the housekeeper. You speak to me like an employee. You move my things, make decisions for me, and call that respect?" Ethan stepped forward, raising his hands as if trying to calm the room. "Stop, both of you. It's Christmas, for God's sake." "This isn't about Christmas," I said. "This is about 5 years of being treated like a servant." "Mom, please," he said, lowering his voice again. "You're overreacting. Sabrina's trying. Can't you just meet her halfway?" I shook my head slowly. "I already walked the whole way, Ethan. You two never took a single step toward me." That made him quiet for a second. I could see the frustration in his eyes, not because he disagreed, but because deep down, he knew I was right. Sabrina broke the silence, her tone suddenly hard. "You know what? This isn't fair. Ethan and I have been patient, trying to make this place feel like home, and you keep acting like we're intruding." "Because you are," I said simply. "This is my home." She laughed bitterly. "Your home? Please. One day this house will be ours anyway. We're just living here early." That was it. The truth she'd been hiding behind all her smiles. The ambition that had been peeking through every time she called this place our house instead of your house. I looked right at her and said, slow and calm, "This may one day be your house, Sabrina, but it will never be yours." The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Ethan looked between us, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, "you can own walls, but not history. You can take space, but not roots. And you, Sabrina, will never understand the difference." She clenched her jaw, the fake kindness completely gone. "You think you can scare me with your old woman talk? You're alone, Eleanor. You need us." That made me smile for the first time that morning. "Need you? For what? To be reminded that I don't matter?" "No, dear. I've been alone before. I survived it once, and I can do it again." Ethan raised his voice for the first time. "Mom, stop it. You're turning this into something ugly." "Ethan," I said softly, "you were 5 years old when your father died. You held my hand at the funeral and told me, 'Don't cry, Mom. I'll take care of you.' Remember that?" He looked down. "Of course I remember." "Well," I said, "I guess you forgot how." That hit him like a slap. He didn't answer. He just stared at the floor. Sabrina stepped closer, voice trembling but angry. "You can't talk to him like that. He's your son." "And you can't talk to me like I'm your maid," I said. "So maybe we're even now." The kitchen felt colder. The only sound was the ticking of the clock and the clatter of the fork Sabrina had dropped on the table. No one spoke for a long time. Then Ethan muttered, "This is crazy. You're acting like a stranger, Mom." I looked at him and said quietly, "No, Ethan. I've been a stranger in my own house for years. You just finally noticed." The silence that followed was heavy. Sabrina's eyes darted away first. Her confidence cracked, not from fear, but from the realization that I finally meant every word. That's when I saw it, the first flicker of panic. Not because of Christmas, but because she knew this wasn't just a fight. It was a shift. For the first time, she wasn't in control. I picked up my cup, took one last sip of cold coffee, and said, "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have plans to make." Then I walked out, leaving them both standing there, two grown adults who suddenly had no idea what to do without the woman they'd been taking for granted. And as I closed the kitchen door behind me, I heard Sabrina whisper under her breath, her voice shaking, "She's lost her mind." But she was wrong. I wasn't losing my mind. I was finally finding my voice. And that's much more dangerous. That night, the house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that doesn't comfort. It presses down on you, heavy and still. Ethan and Sabrina had gone to bed after hours of whispering behind their door. I didn't care what they said. I already knew what I had to do. I sat alone in the living room for a long time, just listening to the clock and the wind outside. Then, without really thinking, I walked upstairs to my bedroom. There's a small cherrywood drawer in the corner. Henry made it by hand 40 years ago. The handles are worn smooth, and one of the drawers always sticks when you pull it open. I hadn't touched it in years, but that night I knew exactly what I was looking for. When I finally managed to slide it open, I saw the things I kept hidden for decades. Old letters, faded photos, the watch Henry wore every day. And then, at the very bottom, wrapped in a handkerchief, there it was. The letter. Henry's handwriting. Strong, neat, and patient, just like him. I unfolded the paper carefully, afraid it might fall apart after all these years. The ink had faded, but I still knew every word by heart. If the day ever comes when this house no longer holds laughter, protect it with your wisdom, not your pain. He wrote that right after Ethan left for college. Back then, I didn't understand what he meant. Now, I did. I sat on the edge of the bed, reading those words over and over again until the tears stopped coming. Then I saw something else, an envelope tucked behind the letter. Henry's will. The old one, from before he died. My hands trembled a little as I opened it. Inside, in his precise handwriting, was the line that would change everything. Hartman Estate shall belong only to the person who lives within it in honesty and respect. Honesty and respect. 2 simple words. But neither of them lived in this house anymore. Sabrina had filled it with noise, control, and manipulation. Ethan had filled it with silence and excuses. And me? I had filled it with fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of losing them. Fear of standing up for myself. I folded the will carefully and placed it beside me on the bed. Henry had left me a message 10 years ago, and I had ignored it. But not anymore. That night I picked up the phone and called a number I hadn't dialed in years. Julian Decker. He was Henry's old friend and our family lawyer. It took a few rings before he answered. Eleanor? My God, it's been ages. Are you all right? I hesitated. I'm fine, Julian, but I need your help. It's about the house. The house? His tone changed. Eleanor, what's going on? I want to transfer Hartman Estate into a trust, I said slowly. And I want to make sure no one, not even my son, can sell it or use it as collateral. Ever. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When he spoke again, his voice was low, cautious. Eleanor, are you sure about this? You're talking about cutting your son out of control over the property. That's not a small thing. I know exactly what I'm doing, I said, and I'm not cutting him out. I'm protecting what his father built, what we built. He sighed. This sounds like more than paperwork. Is someone pressuring you? I smiled to myself. No, Julian. No one's pressuring me anymore. That's the point. He was quiet for a moment, then gently. You're starting a war, Eleanor. I looked at Henry's old photo on the nightstand and felt something settle in me. Not anger, not even sadness, just certainty. No, Julian, I said. I'm ending one. I heard him exhale slowly. All right, come by tomorrow. We'll start the process. I'll prepare the documents. Thank you, I whispered. And Julian, don't tell anyone I called. Not yet. Of course. When I hung up, the room felt different. Not lighter, but steadier. For the first time in years, I had a plan that wasn't about surviving. It was about reclaiming. I turned back to the cherrywood drawer. Inside, I put the will and the letter together, folded neatly. Then I added one more thing. The spare house key that Sabrina had made copies of without asking me. I'd found it in the hallway drawer earlier that week. She didn't know I knew. I locked the cherrywood drawer. Then I sat for a moment, running my fingers across its surface. That drawer had held so many memories, wedding vows, birthday cards, love letters. Now it held something new. Power. I lit a candle on the nightstand, the one I kept for nights when I couldn't sleep, and watched the flame flicker in the dark. The light reflected off the cherrywood like it was alive. For a moment it looked almost like Henry was there, sitting beside me, calm and certain as always. I whispered, Don't worry, Henry. I remember what you said. I'll protect it with wisdom. Then I took a deep breath and blew out the candle. The flame vanished, but its reflection lingered for a second on the cherrywood, like a small spark waiting to burn again. That was the moment I realized something important. This wasn't just about a house, it was about me, and the secret I had just awakened in that drawer was no longer sleeping. A week passed after that night. I didn't argue anymore. I didn't even speak much. I cooked what I wanted, cleaned what I needed, and stayed out of their way. On the surface, everything looked normal again, but underneath, something was changing. Not in them, but in me. I had stopped feeling angry. Anger is loud. I was done being loud. Now I was listening, watching, waiting. One afternoon, Ethan asked me to dust his office. He was always too busy to do it himself, and Sabrina never bothered. So, while they were both out, I went in. The room was messy. Papers, receipts, open drawers. He used to be so organized. But as I wiped the desk, I noticed something strange. A folder was half hidden under a pile of envelopes. My name wasn't on it, but something told me to look. Inside were credit card statements. Not Ethan's usual ones. These were new, with unfamiliar numbers and higher limits. The name at the top of every page was Sabrina Hale. I flipped through the pages. Louis Vuitton, Chanel, hotels in Miami and New York. Thousands of dollars, all charged to Ethan's cards. At first, I thought maybe he knew. Maybe it was shared. But the balances didn't add up. There were payments coming from another account I didn't recognize. One marked simply as private savings, transfer. Something in my stomach turned cold. I opened Ethan's drawer and found more documents. Loan applications, credit approvals, and a printout of something that made my hands tremble. An email. It was between Sabrina and someone named Marcus Reed. Marcus, her cousin. The same one she'd bragged about being a real estate agent. The email said, "Once Ethan agrees to the sale, we can process the listing quietly. You'll get your commission, and I'll finally be rid of this old house." My house. She was planning to sell my house. I sat there for a long moment staring at the words, the sound of my own heartbeat filling the room. Then I stood up and closed the drawer carefully. If there's one thing Henry taught me, it's that the truth always leaves a trail. You just have to follow it. That night, after Ethan and Sabrina went to bed, I picked up the phone again. This time, I didn't call the lawyer. I called someone else. "Walter Griggs," I said when the line connected. "It's Eleanor Hartman." He chuckled softly. "Well, I'll be damned. It's been a while, Mrs. Hartman. You need a detective again?" "I need someone who can find the truth," I said. Quietly. He didn't ask for details. He never did. "Meet me tomorrow," he said. The next afternoon, we sat in a small cafe downtown. He looked older, slower maybe, but his eyes were still sharp, the kind of sharp that cuts through lies. I slid a small envelope across the table. Inside were copies of the credit statements and the email. "I don't want revenge, Walter," I said. "I just want to know how deep it goes." He nodded. "Understood. Give me a week." When he left, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. A week later, he called. His voice was calm, but there was something in his tone that told me the news wouldn't be good. "Mrs. Hartman, you might want to sit down," he said. I was already sitting. "She's over $60,000 in debt," he said. "Multiple credit cards in Ethan's name and 2 in her own. She's been opening hidden accounts, faking her income, and transferring money between them to keep Ethan from noticing." My grip tightened on the phone. "How long has this been going on?" "At least 2 years. And that's not all." He paused. "She's been talking to that cousin, Marcus Reed, real estate guy. They've been discussing a quiet sale of your house. She's telling him Ethan will sign the papers as soon as she convinces you to move out." My stomach dropped, but my voice stayed steady. "Under whose name?" "Ethan's," he said, "all under the pretense of family planning, but the proceeds would have gone straight to her accounts." For a moment I couldn't speak. I could hear the faint buzz of the old desk lamp beside me, the only light in the room. Walter hesitated. "Mrs. Hartman, if I can give you some advice, document everything. Don't confront her yet. Let her make the next move." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "Thank you, Walter." After I hung up, I sat there for a long time. The lamp flickered. The house felt colder than usual. I took out the documents he'd sent, photos, printouts, transaction lists, and spread them across the desk. The numbers blurred together, but the truth was clear. It wasn't about money. It was about control. For 5 years, she'd controlled the house, the atmosphere, even Ethan's loyalty. And now she wanted the one thing left that wasn't hers. The deed. I stared at the credit statement showing a $5,000 handbag. Then another, plane tickets to Miami. Another, a consultation fee sent to Marcus Reed Realty. Every line was a confession written in numbers. And numbers don't lie. The clock on the wall ticked softly. I reached for my lighter, something I hadn't used in years. Henry had quit smoking before he died, but I kept the lighter, silver, engraved with his initials. I lit a candle, not a cigarette. The flame flickered across the papers, casting small shadows that looked almost alive. I thought about everything Sabrina had taken. My peace, my dignity, my son's respect. And now she wanted my home. I smiled slightly, not from anger, but from certainty. If they like games, I whispered to the empty room, then I'll be the one writing the rules. The candlelight flickered again, catching on the silver of the lighter, on the edge of the papers, on the photograph of Henry beside me. This time, I didn't feel sad when I looked at him. I felt ready, because grief had made me quiet. But truth was about to make me dangerous. And as the candle burned low, I leaned back in my chair and whispered to the dark, "They have no idea what's coming." It started with one idea that came to me late at night, simple, almost innocent. If Sabrina wanted a perfect Christmas built on lies, then maybe it was time her own family saw how she built it. I sat at my desk, the glow of the laptop lighting up the room. The house was quiet, just the sound of the old clock ticking in the hallway. I opened my email and began to type. To Gregorio Hale, her uncle in Miami. CC, Claudine Voss, her sister in New York. Subject, a concern about Sabrina. Then I wrote slowly, each word measured, polite, impossible to misinterpret. Dear Gregorio, dear Claudine, I hope you'll forgive me for being direct. I'm writing because I'm genuinely worried about Sabrina. She's been taking on large debts, and I fear Ethan doesn't know the full extent of it. I'm not sure how to help without causing more tension. Perhaps you could offer some advice. I paused. Then, almost casually, I attached a few files. By mistake, of course. A PDF with bank statements, copies of the credit cards under Ethan's name, and one handwritten list of Sabrina's purchases, designer bags, spa trips, hotel stays. Before hitting send, I read it one last time. It sounded kind, maybe even naive, just a mother concerned about her daughter-in-law. Then I clicked send. I sat back and watched the little paper airplane icon vanish from the screen. The act felt both terrifying and liberating, like exhaling after holding your breath for years. The first reply came faster than I expected. Gregorio's name appeared in my inbox barely 10 minutes later. Mrs. Hartman, this is outrageous. I had no idea Sabrina was borrowing under Ethan's name. She told us she was managing her finances responsibly. I'm coming to Charleston immediately. This deceit will end now. I stared at his words, reading them twice. Gregorio Hale was a man who rarely raised his voice, but I could feel the fury between each sentence. Then another email arrived. From Claudine. Her tone was colder, more controlled, but no less dangerous. Mrs. Hartman, thank you for informing us. I've seen the documents you sent. The numbers don't lie. We will confront Sabrina in person. December 23rd. I strongly suggest you stay clear when we do. I smiled, not out of spite, but because for the first time someone else would finally see the truth I'd been living with for 5 years. I closed the laptop and looked toward the window. Outside, the first snowflakes of the season had started to fall. Soft and hesitant, the streetlights turned them to gold as they drifted past the glass. Christmas is coming, I whispered to myself. The next morning, I made myself tea and checked my emails again. There were more messages, Gregorio asking for my address, Claudine confirming travel plans, even a short, awkward note from Marcus, Sabrina's cousin, thanking me for bringing this to light. Everything was falling into place, quietly, cleanly, without me having to raise my voice once. For years, Sabrina had painted herself as the perfect wife, the ideal hostess, charming, generous, elegant. She fooled everyone with her smiles and small talk, but I had learned something in my years of being invisible. Lies don't need to be shouted to be exposed. You just have to let the right people hear the truth at the right time. And on December 23rd, they would. That evening, Ethan came home late as usual. He barely noticed the calm look on my face. He said something about Sabrina shopping for Christmas gifts, something about new guests arriving. I just nodded, stirring sugar into my tea. He kissed my forehead and went upstairs. I waited until his footsteps disappeared, then whispered softly to the empty room. She wanted a perfect Christmas. She'll have one. Just not the kind she imagined. Later that night, I stood by the window again. The snow had thickened. The city lights glowed through the white haze. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped by my house. In the reflection on the glass, I saw not an old woman, but someone who had quietly taken back control of her story. Some people shout for justice, others just write an email and wait. And as I watched the snow fall heavier, I thought to myself, this Christmas will be perfect, Sabrina. Perfect in every way you never saw coming. I didn't sleep much after the snow started falling. The house was quiet again, but not in the same way as before. It wasn't heavy silence anymore. It was preparation, the kind that comes before a storm. I woke up early the next morning and started moving through the house like I always did. Only this time I wasn't cleaning for them. I was cleaning for myself, clearing away the last pieces of who I had been. First, the dining room. The long table where I had served hundreds of meals, every plate polished, every glass shining. I opened the cabinet and took out the silver set Henry and I received as a wedding gift. I locked it away in the old chest upstairs. The same with the wine, the expensive bottles Ethan never noticed but Sabrina bragged about. I moved them into the small cellar and turned the key. Then the china, the good set. The one she always made me use when her friends came over, pretending it was hers. I packed it carefully in boxes and sealed them tight. They would stay locked in the storage closet, far away from Sabrina's perfect Christmas dinner. When I was done, I walked into the kitchen. It was the heart of the house once. Now it felt like a stage. I opened the refrigerator. Every shelf was empty. I had cleared it the night before. The cleaners wouldn't be coming either. I'd canceled the service. The house was spotless but hollow. Exactly how she liked it. And exactly how she'd find it. I moved through each room slowly, checking, locking, making sure every little piece of control was mine one last time. The curtains she'd chosen, the ones that blocked the morning light, I left them closed. Let her live in the darkness she created. Upstairs, I stopped by Ethan's office. I placed the envelope with the updated trust papers inside his top drawer. One day, when the storm was over, he'd find them. And finally understand. Then, in my own room, I pulled the old suitcase from under the bed, the same one I'd used when Henry and I took road trips years ago. I packed light, a few sweaters, my reading glasses, a small notebook, Henry's photograph, and his letter, folded neatly, the ink still faded but strong. When I zipped the bag closed, it felt final, like closing a chapter. Before I left, I walked to the window. The oak tree stood tall in the yard, covered in white. It had seen everything, every fight, every tear, every silence. Henry had planted it with me the year we moved in. I still remember him saying, "When this tree grows, it'll remind us that strength isn't loud. It's patient." I pressed my hand against the glass just for a moment. "Goodbye, Henry," I whispered. "And thank you for teaching me how to be patient long enough to act at the right time." Then I turned back to the bed. On the nightstand sat a small notepad. I tore off a page and wrote slowly, carefully, the words I wanted her to find. "Your perfect house. Enjoy it." I folded the note once and placed it in the middle of the kitchen table, right where she would see it the moment she walked in. The taxi arrived at 8:30 sharp. The driver, a young man with kind eyes, took my bag and asked, "Heading somewhere nice, ma'am?" I smiled. "Yes," I said softly. "Somewhere quiet." He didn't ask more. I liked that. As the car rolled down the long driveway, I looked at the house one last time. The red brick, the windows, the snow gathering on the roof. But I didn't wave. I didn't even turn around. For years, I'd left that house 100 times, for errands, appointments, groceries, but always knowing I had to come back. This was different. This time, I wasn't leaving. I was letting go. When we reached the main road, the driver asked for the name of the hotel again. "Seaside Cliff Inn," I said. "Reservation under Clara Evans." He nodded, scribbling it down. "Nice place. Good ocean view." "I heard," I said. "I could use a little view." The name wasn't just for privacy, it was symbolic. Clara Evans, not Eleanor Hartman, not the woman who cleaned up after everyone else. For a few days, I could just be someone else. Someone free. The drive took an hour. The snow grew heavier the closer we got to the coast. The world outside looked clean and white, untouched. When we reached the inn, I stepped out and felt the cold air sting my face. It wasn't the kind of cold that hurt. It was the kind that wakes you up. I checked in, smiled at the woman behind the desk, and took the room key. Room 203, simple, quiet, with a view of the sea. I set my bag on the chair and sat by the window, watching the waves crash in the distance. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the fragile kind that depends on silence, but the real kind that comes when you finally stop pretending. I made myself a cup of tea and took out Henry's letter, reading it once more. The paper was soft at the edges now. If the day ever comes when this house no longer holds laughter, protect it with your wisdom. I smiled, folding it gently. I did, Henry. I finally did. Outside, the snow began to fall again, mixing with the sound of waves. I closed my eyes and listened. Tomorrow would be December 23rd. Tomorrow, Gregorio and Claudine would arrive. Tomorrow, Sabrina's perfect Christmas would begin and unravel. I wasn't going to be there to see it, but I didn't need to. The truth would do all the work. I took one last sip of tea, leaned back in the chair, and whispered, "Goodbye, my house, my prison, my lesson." Then I smiled, small, quiet, real. "Now," I said, "I'll live in freedom." And somewhere far away under that snow-covered roof, I knew the storm was just beginning. It all started before sunrise. At 6 in the morning on December 23rd, the peace inside Hartman Estate shattered. Sabrina's voice echoed down the hallway, high-pitched, frantic. "There's no food. The pantry's empty. Where are the decorations?" From my hotel room at Seaside Cliff Inn, I was still in bed, sipping coffee, when the first call came. Ethan's name flashed on my phone. "Mom," he said out of breath. "Please help us. We don't know what to do." I could almost hear Sabrina shouting in the background, drawers opening, doors slamming. "Con 32 toy, Ethan," I said quietly. "Con ju longe don ban un." "You're 32 years old. You can handle a table and a few guests." There was a long silence, then a defeated sigh. "They're arriving in 2 hours, Mom." "Then you'd better hurry," I said, and ended the call. Back at the house, the chaos grew like a storm. 25 relatives, cousins, uncles, nieces, children, began arriving with suitcases, coats, and boxes of gifts. The sound of the doorbell never stopped. Luggage piled up by the staircase, perfume mixed with the smell of panic. Sabrina tried to smile as she opened the door, her hair undone, makeup half finished. "Merry Christmas! Come in, everyone!" But her voice cracked under the pressure. Inside, the guests stopped short. No garlands, no table setting, no food, just an empty house that looked nothing like the perfect Christmas Sabrina had promised. Gregorio, her uncle from Miami, dropped his coat on the chair and stared around. "Sabrina, this is the perfect Christmas you bragged about?" She froze, her smile dying instantly. "There were complications." "Complications?" His voice rose. "You invited 25 people to a house with no food?" Ethan tried to step in. "Uncle, But Gregorio slammed his hand on the table. "You what? Expected someone else to handle it?" "Who exactly?" The room fell silent. Every head turned towards Sabrina. Then Claudine, her older sister, pulled a folder from her purse and placed it on the table. "Before we go any further, I think there's something you should explain." She opened the folder and spread out a stack of printed papers, account statements, credit card bills, debt notices. $60,000, Claudine said coldly. "All in your name, Sabrina, and most of it on Ethan's credit." Sabrina went pale. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "Where did the money go?" Claudine pressed. "Designer handbags? Trips to New York? You told us you were saving for a new business?" The family murmured around the room, whispering, judging, connecting the dots. Ethan looked down at the papers, confusion turning to disbelief. "You told me these were investments." Sabrina's hands shook. "Ethan, I can explain." "Explain what?" Gregorio cut in. "That you lied to every one of us? That you used this house, your husband and his mother for your games?" Her face crumpled. Tears spilled down, but no one moved to comfort her. In the middle of the chaos, I imagined the ticking of that old clock in the hallway, the one that had seen generations of family dinners, laughter, and arguments. It was probably still ticking now, marking every second of her unraveling. At the hotel, I sat by the window, watching the ocean. The waves were calm, steady, rhythmic, nothing like the storm I knew was happening back home. I poured myself a glass of red wine and took a slow sip. It wasn't joy I felt. Not exactly. It was something deeper, a strange mix of relief, justice, and sadness. I had never wanted to destroy anyone. I only wanted them to see me, to understand what they had turned me into. A ghost in my own house. Now, they were the ones standing in the emptiness they created. By noon, I stopped checking my phone. The calls kept coming, messages piling up. I could imagine every sound, every argument, Gregorio's booming voice, Claudine's sharp tone, Ethan's desperate attempts to hold things together, and Sabrina's silence, the sound of a woman who finally realized she had run out of people to blame. I leaned back in the chair, letting the sea breeze brush against my face through the open window. 5 years of silence, of being told I was overreacting, of being treated like help. And now, the truth was speaking louder than I ever could. I raised my glass slightly toward the horizon and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Sabrina. You finally got your perfect day." That evening, the sky turned soft gray over the water. Somewhere, far away, my phone buzzed again. Another missed call, another message left unanswered. I didn't need to hear their voices anymore. For the first time in years, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. The battle had been fought, not with shouting, but with silence. And as I watched the waves roll in, I realized I had finally won. Not through revenge, through freedom. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of waves hitting the rocks below my window. It took me a few seconds to remember where I was. The Seaside Cliff Inn, room 203. For the first time in years, I hadn't dreamed about the house. I sat up slowly, the light soft and gray. My phone was on the table. 10 missed calls, 1 voicemail. I pressed play. "Eleanor," a familiar voice said. "It's Julian. I wanted to let you know. They know everything." Gregorio confronted her last night. Claudine confirmed the documents. They're pulling out of all the financial deals. Whatever plan Sabrina had is gone. There was a pause, then his voice softened. "I suppose this means you got your justice?" I smiled faintly, more out of habit than joy. Justice. Such a heavy word for something that felt so light. When I called him back, he answered on the first ring. "Julian," I said quietly, "you didn't have to call so early." "I thought you'd want to know," he replied. "You were right, Eleanor, every word. They're furious. Gregorio says she'll never see another dollar from the family again. Ethan tried to defend her, but the evidence is too strong." I took a slow breath. "Then I guess it's done." "It's more than done," Julian said. "They want to talk to you. Gregorio asked if you'd be willing to come back to explain your side of things." "No," I said simply. "There's nothing left to explain." He hesitated. "You sure? This is your chance to—" "Julian," I interrupted gently, "justice doesn't need an audience. It just needs to exist." And it does. He didn't argue. "You've changed," he said after a moment. "I finally learned," I said, "that peace doesn't come from people understanding you. It comes from no longer needing them to." He was quiet, then said softly, "Henry would be proud of you." That one line nearly broke me. I didn't answer right away. My throat felt tight. "I hope so," I finally said. "Thank you, Julian." When I hung up, the silence filled the room again, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. A few hours later, my phone buzzed again. A message from Walter Griggs, the old detective. Just one photo. Sabrina, surrounded by her relatives in the living room. Her makeup streaked, her hair a mess, still wearing that red dress she'd been so proud of. Her face twisted in shock and humiliation as Gregorio held up the folder of documents. Behind her, Ethan looked like a man who just realized his entire world wasn't real. Walter had added a short note under the picture. "Thought you'd want to know the storm hit land." I stared at the screen for a long time, then turned it off. There was nothing left to see. That afternoon, I walked down to the beach. The air was cold, sharp, but it felt good. I took off my shoes and stood at the edge of the water. The tide came in and covered my feet, then pulled back again, like a heartbeat. For years, I'd lived in that house afraid to move, afraid to make noise, afraid to disturb the fragile peace I thought I was protecting. Now, I realized it had never been peace at all. It was quiet, built on fear, the kind that slowly eats you alive. I thought of Henry, the letter, the will, the oak tree. The way he used to say, "You can't teach people to value you. They have to remember it on their own." And in that moment, I could almost hear his voice again, warm, steady, familiar. "When people forget your worth, Eleanor, let them learn it the hard way. You don't have to remind them. The truth will." I closed my eyes and whispered, "They're learning now, Henry. Finally." A wave rolled in and touched my feet again, cold, but not painful. It felt almost cleansing, I walked along the shore for a while thinking about everything that had happened. Not the lies, not the shouting, but the silence afterward. There was something strangely beautiful about it. For the first time, I wasn't holding anyone's anger, anyone's expectations. Just myself. The sea stretched endlessly in front of me, gray and alive. The horizon was faint, like a thin line between everything I had survived and everything I still had left to live. Somewhere behind me, back in Charleston, Sabrina was probably still crying. Ethan was probably asking questions he should have asked years ago, and that house, the one I'd built, cleaned, protected, was finally standing on its own. I smiled softly. "You're safe now," I whispered to it in my mind. Maybe one day I'd go back. But not yet. Right now, I needed distance, from the walls that held too many memories, from the rooms where I'd been invisible. I needed air. I needed light. I needed to remember what it felt like to live for myself. That night, I sat by the window again, a blanket around my shoulders and a cup of tea in my hand. Outside, the waves kept rolling in, constant, unbothered by everything that had happened on land. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lonely. I just felt quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't hurt. Somewhere deep inside, the pain was still there, but it was soft now, almost gentle, like a bruise fading after a long time. And beneath it, something new was growing. Not joy, not victory, just peace. It was close to midnight when the phone rang again. I almost didn't answer. After everything, I thought silence would be my last act, but something in me said to pick up. "Mom?" His voice was hoarse, cracked, smaller than I remembered. "Yes, Ethan." He exhaled slowly. "Can we talk?" I sat down by the window, pulling the blanket tighter around my shoulders. The night outside was still. The ocean had gone dark, but I could hear the waves. Slow, steady, the way a heartbeat sounds when it's calming down. "Yes," I said quietly. "We can talk." He didn't speak right away. I could hear him breathing, like he was choosing his words carefully. When he finally spoke, his voice shook a little. "Mom, I'm sorry for everything. I don't even know where to start." I stayed silent. Sometimes silence gives people the courage to keep talking. "I thought I was protecting my wife," he continued. "I thought being a good husband meant taking her side no matter what. But I didn't see what that was doing to you. I didn't see what I was turning into." His words were heavy, honest. For the first time in years, he wasn't trying to defend, explain, or justify. He was just talking like the boy I used to know. "Do you know what I kept thinking about all night?" he said. "That day when I was 8, and the neighbor yelled at you because of his fence. You stood there and didn't say anything until I spoke up for you. I thought I was brave then. But maybe that was the last time I really stood beside you." I smiled faintly, though he couldn't see it. "You were a good boy, Ethan. You still are." He sighed. "No, Mom, I wasn't. I let her treat you like you were nothing. I told myself you didn't mind, that you liked helping, that it made you happy. But that was just easier for me than facing the truth." I listened quietly. His voice carried guilt, exhaustion, maybe even a kind of shame that had been waiting years to be spoken aloud. "You were never the problem," I said softly. "You just forgot how to look." He paused, then said, "I think I see it now. All those mornings you'd make breakfast before we even woke up. The house always smelled like coffee and soap. I never wondered who kept it running. I just thought it was supposed to be that way." "That's what love looks like sometimes," I said. "It hides behind routine until no one sees it anymore." He was quiet again. I could hear a faint echo of voices behind him, probably the remains of that disastrous day. Then, slowly, he said, "Mom, she's gone." I didn't ask where or why. I already knew. "She left an hour ago," he said. "Her uncle told her to leave. Claudine said she needs help, real help. Financial counseling, therapy. I don't know. I just know she's not here anymore." "Maybe that's for the best," I said. "Maybe," he whispered, "but it still hurts." "It's supposed to," I replied. "That's how you know it's real." For a while, neither of us said anything. The line stayed open, just breathing between us. Then Ethan said, "You know, I used to think you were hard to live with. Always careful, always precise, always watching. I used to think it meant you didn't trust anyone." I laughed softly. "And now?" Now I think maybe you were the only one who saw things clearly. I didn't want him to drown in guilt, so I said, Ethan, the past isn't something we erase. It's something we learn how to carry without letting it crush us. He swallowed hard. Mom, I want to fix this. I don't know how, but I will. I'll make things right. You don't need to fix anything, I said gently. You just need to remember. Respect doesn't come from guilt. It comes from choice. And you still have that. He took a long breath, then said quietly, I don't deserve your forgiveness. It's not about deserving, I said. It's about being willing to see. And you finally do. There was a pause, then a sound that broke something inside me, Ethan crying. Not the frustrated kind of cry, not anger, but the kind that comes when you finally let yourself feel everything you've been avoiding. I love you, Mom, he said. I should have said it more. I know, I said softly. I always knew. He took a moment, then asked, Will you come home? Not yet, I said. I think I'll stay a few more days. The house needs to breathe without me for a while. And maybe you need to be there alone too. Just you, not her, not me. He nodded, though I couldn't see it. I understand. Ethan, I said, you can't protect other people if you don't respect the person who gave you life. Remember that. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was low but steady. I will. I promise. We stayed on the phone for a long time after that. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. It didn't matter. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was full of everything we hadn't said for years. Before hanging up, he said, Mom? Yes? Thank you for teaching me the hardest lesson in the gentlest way. I closed my eyes and let out a long breath. You taught it to yourself, Ethan. I just gave you the chance. When the call ended, I sat there for a while, watching the reflection of the moon ripple on the water. The night air came through the window, cool and calm. There was pain still, yes. But underneath it, something warmer had begun to settle. It wasn't victory. It wasn't relief. It was peace. Quiet, fragile, but real. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt whole. It was Christmas Eve when I went home. The morning air in Charleston was cool and pale, the kind that feels like it's been washed clean after a storm. Julian drove me from the inn to the house. Neither of us said much. There wasn't anything left to plan, nothing left to prove. When we turned onto the long driveway, I saw the oak tree again. The snow had melted around its roots, leaving a ring of bare earth, dark, alive. The branches stretched wide, the same way they had the day Henry planted it. Are you sure you're ready? Julian asked quietly. I nodded. I've been ready for 5 years. He parked, and for a long moment I just sat there, looking at the house, the red brick, the porch, the windows that once made me feel trapped. Now they looked still, waiting. When I opened the front door, the hinges creaked. The sound was small but familiar. Inside, the house smelled faintly of candle wax and burnt wood. Someone had tried to light the fireplace. The silence was thick, not angry anymore, just tired. In the living room, they were all there. Gregorio, standing with his hands clasped in front of him. Claudine, poised but softened around the eyes. Ethan, pale, quiet, uncertain. And Sabrina, sitting on the edge of the couch, her head bowed, her face swollen from tears. When they saw me, no one spoke at first. Gregorio was the first to move. He stepped forward, clearing his throat. Eleanor, he said, his voice heavy, formal, but sincere. We owe you an apology. I met his eyes. No, I said gently. You don't. He frowned slightly. After what happened? Loi Shin Loi, I said slowly, doesn't fix the years of being looked down on. It doesn't erase the silence, the disrespect. But the truth can. And now, the truth is out. That's enough. Gregorio looked down, nodding. Claudine murmured softly, You've handled this with grace I didn't think possible. I didn't have grace, I said. I had time. And time teaches you who people really are. I turned toward Ethan. He looked older than before, the kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep. When our eyes met, he took a hesitant step forward. Mom, he said quietly, I told them everything. About what I did. And didn't do. I nodded. You don't have to explain, Ethan. I know, he said. But I wanted to. You deserve better than what we gave you. There was a tremor in his voice. He wasn't crying, but I could feel the weight of it pressing behind his words. Then Sabrina stood up. Her hands shook as she spoke. Mrs. Hartman. It was the first time she had ever called me that. I don't expect forgiveness, she said. I don't even know how to ask for it. I only know that I was wrong, in more ways than I can count. I looked at her for a long moment. She looked smaller now, not physically, but in spirit. The confidence, the arrogance, the sharp tone, all gone. Just a woman standing in the wreckage of her own choices. Forgiveness isn't a gift, I said quietly. It's a process. You'll have to find it on your own. She nodded, eyes glistening, unable to speak. Julian stepped closer to the table and placed a folder down. All the papers are finalized, he said. The house is now protected under the trust. No one can sell or alter it without Eleanor's approval. Ethan nodded slowly. That's how it should be. Julian turned to me. Would you like me to read it out loud? No, I said, shaking my head. I know what it says. He smiled slightly. Then I think my work here is done. As he gathered his things, Gregorio approached me again. Eleanor, if you ever need anything... I'll be fine, I interrupted softly. I have what I need. He hesitated, then gave a short bow of respect before leaving with Claudine. The room emptied until only Ethan, Sabrina, and I remained. For a long moment, no one spoke. The fire crackled quietly. Then I said, I think it's time to start over. Ethan nodded. Can I stay here for a few days? This is your home, I said. It always has been. You just forgot for a while. He smiled weakly, then looked at Sabrina. We'll talk later, he said to her, his voice gentle but firm. She nodded, eyes down. When they both left the room, I walked to the fireplace and picked up Henry's old photo from the mantel. I wiped a bit of dust from the frame. You were right, I whispered. The house is safe again. Outside, the wind moved through the oak tree, carrying the faint sound of leaves rustling like a whisper. For the first time in years, I felt the warmth of my home wrap around me, not as a burden, but as belonging. I stood there for a long while, watching the fire glow, listening to the quiet hum of life returning. Peace doesn't always come with noise or applause. Sometimes it arrives as silence that finally feels kind. And that morning, in my house, I found it again. The morning after Christmas, Julian came to the house with a leather folder under his arm. He moved with the quiet precision of a man who had seen too many families break apart over what they thought was theirs. We sat in the living room, the same room where everything had started, where silence had once been heavier than words. Now it felt like a courtroom, calm but waiting for a verdict. Julian opened the folder slowly. Eleanor, this is the final version, he said. I'll read it aloud for everyone. Ethan sat beside me, tense but composed. Gregorio stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. Sabrina sat on the far end of the couch, clutching a handkerchief, her eyes red and swollen. Julian adjusted his glasses and began. The property known as Hartman Estate is hereby transferred into the Hartman Family Trust. No individual may sell, mortgage, or alter ownership of said property without the explicit consent of Eleanor Hartman or the appointed trustee after her passing. He looked up briefly before continuing. Residency rights are hereby granted to Ethan Hartman for life. However, Sabrina Hale Hartman is excluded from any legal or financial claim to the property. Any attempt to access, transfer, or modify the deed will be considered a breach of trust. Sabrina gasped. What? Julian continued, ignoring her interruption. All outstanding debts and liabilities created under Ethan Hartman's name are to be legally reviewed. If proven fraudulent or unauthorized, civil and criminal proceedings may be initiated under state law. When he finished, the room was silent, the kind of silence that sits between fear and understanding. Sabrina finally stood up, her voice trembling. Eleanor, you can't do this. You can't erase me from this family with a signature. I met her eyes steadily. I didn't erase you, Sabrina. You did that yourself. One lie at a time. Her lip quivered. You're punishing me. No, I said softly. I'm protecting what's left. She took a step forward, desperation rising in her voice. You think this makes you right? You think signing a paper makes you the hero? I don't need to be a hero, I replied. I just needed to stop being your servant. She stared at me, speechless. Julian placed the pen in front of me. All that's left is your signature, Mrs. Hartman. I took it slowly. The pen felt heavier than I expected, maybe because I knew this wasn't just ink. It was history, years of silence, finally turned into something permanent. I signed my name, Eleanor Hartman. The sound of the pen scratching across paper was louder than I thought it would be. When I set it down, the air in the room shifted. Sabrina's voice broke. You really did it? Yes, I said quietly. I didn't do anything cruel, Sabrina. I only made sure the law reflects what's fair. Gregorio's voice was firm. You should be grateful. She's still leaving your husband a home. Another woman in her position would have taken it all. Sabrina looked at him, stunned. Uncle, he cut her off sharply. Enough. You lied to every one of us. You humiliated your husband. And now you have the nerve to play the victim? Sabrina sat back down, covering her face with both hands. Her shoulders trembled, but I didn't feel anger anymore, only a quiet sadness for what she could have been. Julian closed the folder. It's done, he said. Hartman Estate is officially under protection. Ethan looked at me, eyes shining but steady. Thank you, Mom. I nodded. No need to thank me. This isn't just for me. It's for you, and for every generation after us that will live here knowing this house wasn't bought with deceit. Sabrina lifted her head, her voice breaking. You'll never forgive me, will you? I looked at her, really looked at her, and said, I don't need a perfect daughter-in-law, Sabrina. I just needed an honest human being. Her tears fell silently. Then, for the first time since all of this began, I felt something settle inside me. Calm, steady, unshakable. Justice didn't always arrive with noise or anger. Sometimes it came quietly, in black ink on white paper. Julian gathered his things and left with a nod. Gregorio followed him out. When the door closed, I stood in the quiet room, the folder still open on the table. I touched the signature, firm, final. It wasn't revenge, it was balance. And after 5 long years, balance finally had my name written on it. That night, the house finally felt like home again. Not because it was full of decorations or noise, but because for the first time in years, it was full of peace. The dining table was smaller now, no silver sets, no polished crystal, no fancy candles. Just a simple white cloth, a roast chicken I had cooked myself, and 5 plates, one for each of us. Ethan sat beside me. Across from us were Gregorio and Claudine. Julian sat at the far end, his glasses slipping slightly down his nose, the way they always did when he was relaxed. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, quiet, gentle, the kind that didn't demand attention. The smell of roasted garlic and herbs filled the room. I hadn't cooked like this in years, not for a holiday, not for anyone. For so long, I cooked for duty, for image, for others' comfort. Tonight, I cooked for myself. When everyone had taken their seats, there was a moment of stillness. No one reached for the food right away. It wasn't awkward, just a quiet pause that said more than words could. Then I lifted my glass. To those who know gratitude before they ask for anything else, I said. Gregorio raised his glass. To truth, he added. Claudine smiled softly. To peace. Julian nodded. To justice, that doesn't need noise. And Ethan, his voice low but steady, said, To you, Mom? The glasses clinked gently. The sound was small, but it filled the room like music. For the first time in 5 years, I tasted food that wasn't seasoned with worry. Every bite reminded me I was still here, not surviving, but living. The conversation flowed naturally. No tension, no sharp words, just people, flawed, human, trying to be better. Outside, the snow kept falling, catching the warm glow from the windows. It wasn't the kind of Christmas anyone expected, but it was real, and sometimes real is all you need. Later that night, after everyone had left or gone to bed, I sat alone at the table. The candles had burned low, the plates cleared, the house quiet again. I took out a sheet of paper and began to write. Eleanor, you have lived long enough to understand that family isn't obedience. It's honesty. You lost almost everything to find yourself again, and that was the only way back home. I paused, then opened the drawer and took out Henry's old letter, the one that started it all. The paper was soft from age. The ink faded but strong. I read it one more time. If the house ever loses its laughter, protect it with wisdom. I smiled. I did, Henry. And now it laughs again. I placed my new letter with his, folded them together, and slid them inside the old family album. Between the yellowed photos and worn pages, they belonged there, 2 pieces of a story finally whole. It was almost midnight when I opened the window. The air was cold, sharp, but it didn't sting. It felt clean, the kind of cold that tells you you're alive. The snow had stopped, leaving the world wrapped in silence. Somewhere down the street, faint Christmas music drifted through the night, a piano soft and slow. The lights from the tree reflected in the glass, casting a gentle glow on the walls. For a long time I just stood there, breathing in the quiet, feeling the peace settle around me like a blanket. I thought of everything that had happened, the betrayal, the anger, the silence, the truth, and how somehow all of it had led here. Freedom doesn't always look like running away. Sometimes it looks like standing exactly where you are, and knowing it finally belongs to you again. I whispered softly, "Merry Christmas, Henry." The words disappeared into the cold air, carried away by the wind. Then, after a long pause, I added, "And thank you." The camera, if there were one, would have pulled back slowly then. The woman by the window, the soft light, the snow, the quiet. No victory music, no final speech, just stillness and truth. Because sometimes justice doesn't come with the sound of a gavel. It comes with the silence of someone who was once dismissed, finally peacefully heard.